The world leaders convened for the annual general debate of the United Nations in New York, Manhattan. The 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly serves as an opportunity for head of government to come together and discuss world issues. This year, general debate is being held under the theme Rebuilding Trust and Reigniting Global Solidarity, Accelerating Action on the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals towards peace, prosperity, progress and sustainability for all. Joining us now with more is NBC reporter Blanche Goreses. Blanche, thank you so much for joining us. This will be the first full-scale gathering since the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted traveling 3 years ago. Briefly talk to us about what is expected on the agenda this week at the 78th session UNGA.
Well, the COVID-19 pandemic did disrupt traveling, but nonetheless, the session still continued. If you remember that from 2020 up until 2021, some of the sessions were being held virtually. So the agenda of the General Assembly was being debated every year, depending on the topical issues. The debate that you said is being held under the theme, that is what will inform the debates by the various member states. But then again, topical issues such as the soaring prices of food and fuel, as well as the climate change, as well as the ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict are some of the issues that member states have indicated that they would want the UN to have a stronger voice on, as to set the tone in terms of what the peace or what the peace would look like going forward. This session is also to review the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which the target is 2030, but then again, only 15% of the targets have been achieved. So starting yesterday all the way, even now, the leaders are debating as to what has really gone wrong, what are some of the main challenges in terms of obtaining the Sustainable Development Goals, and whether there are some areas that need to be reviewed and possibly even come up with new targets or the deadlines thereafter. So those are some of the topical issues that continue to dominate the talks here. But today, when the Secretary General opened the UN General Assembly, he did speak about a renewed call for the reform of multilateral institutions. This includes the UN Security Council, this includes the credit agencies, as well as the financing agencies such as the IMF and the World Bank, to say that the developed world need to aid developing countries when it comes to certain issues such as debt relief, and also to fund public good, not just to be profit driven. So this was the call at the opening by the UN Secretary General, which will then inform the debate throughout which the member states, including Namibia, will deliver statements thereof.
Speaking of debt relief, that's, makes up part of the issues that Namibia is facing, as well as climate financing, health, amongst others, are issues of importance to our country. So what is on our president's agenda this week?
We haven't had the privilege of seeing the president's speech or the draft thereof, but those are issues that I'm sure he does speak about not just even at the UN platform, but at every given multilateral platform, where the president would be stating that when climate change or the impact of climate change affect developing countries, Namibia not being spared. If you look at the climate of Namibia, sandwiched between two deserts, and it's one of the driest countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So that is one area that is very close to the current government or the country's agenda, and also now being elevated to the UN level, at least whereby the developing countries are speaking with one voice, to say that the impact of climate change is more severe on developing countries though they are the least contributing factors when it comes to global emissions. So all the countries have committed to the 2015 Paris Agreement, and there are renewed calls to say that let the countries honor what they have committed in the Paris Agreement, which is to avail funding to the developed world to mitigate and come up with adaptation strategies when it comes to climate change. The issue of health that you mentioned, that is also one area that developing countries also want more funding and have called for more funding, given the lessons drawn from the COVID-19 pandemic, for them not to be left behind. If you remember correctly, when the vaccines were manufactured, most developing countries, though they paid up to receive the batches of the vaccines, they were left behind in terms of the manufacturers prioritizing the bigger countries, so to say. Nonetheless, to a point when India led the charge of most countries, stating that this is apartheid, even our president calling it as vaccine apartheid. So those are the lessons that developing countries are taking into consideration when requesting the world to come to the table when it comes to funding for health and other priorities that have to do with a safer planet and overall to meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
Blanche, we know you are on duty. We don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
That was Blanche Goreses, NBC reporter, speaking to us via Zoom from New York.